You see, there's this Brian White guy who I've invited yet again to come on board because he is a reporter and because he gets down into the nitty gritty. And because last week, well, just before he came on my show last week, he had broke news that is continuing to scramble the brains of everybody in the community. Everybody's talking about what Brian brought to the table. I mean, Brian, you didn't do the original work, but you got the original working guy to come on your show and talk about the Chinese and their effort to catch up to Tesla on FSD. And since then, seems like that's about all anybody can talk about.
Yes. So I have cemented my plans to go to the Shanghai Auto Show. I've
Oh,
got a
wow.
number of contacts set up there, and I will be rolling with the out of spec crew for part of it. So not only will I have an opportunity to get some good coverage, but I will have trusted tour guides, as it were, to help me navigate the situation. And that's all very exciting. The thing is, in the comments for that video, I had most people said interesting stuff. That's interesting. But you had 10% saying, you guys are clearly on China's payroll. I am not. I am on no one's payroll. No one's ever offered or given me money for that.
You
Um,
wish. You wish
I,
you had the offer
I
so you
wish I
could
had,
find out. Yeah.
yeah, I wish I had the offer at least. But, and then we had 10% saying, how dare you bring on a guest who's so negative on China? And I was like, what? Well, he should have gone to different cities where FSD, where autonomy is on better display. Look, I'm not inviting someone on to talk beyond their experience. He's traveled through more of China than I imagine most citizens of China has. So
Well,
it's a very big country.
this morning, Elon Musk just 35 minutes ago, as we're recording this, posted this. He says, and it only gets better from here. Tesla is still on track to launch autonomous ride hailing in Austin in June and roll out to many cities in America by the end of the year. The threshold is achieving safety far in excess of the average human driver. Ultimately, autonomous cars will be 1,000 times, I'm sorry, percent, 1,000%. So that would be 100 times better than human-driven cars. So the argument has gone back and forth all week, Brian. I'm more interested right now in trying to assess a little bit of maybe where we are and what it really means. And I've got two pots to divide it into. The first pot is the value of FSD as an accessory, which Tesla currently charges, I think, $8,000 for. So going forward, is that going to still be an $8,000 deal? How will the Chinese things impact it in China? How will it impact it in Europe? How will it impact it in the United States? And then part B would be on terms of Robotaxi. What is the impact in terms of the competitiveness or the field of competition for Tesla going forward? Yeah. So anyway, you start and then I'll jump in from time to time. What do you think?
I think you asked me 9 questions and I'll do my best to remember them all. Worth noting that, yes, Elon said that, but Elon says a lot of things. Yeah, he's, once I made a post and he said good post or something like that. And I mean, clearly the man's not right all the time, because I mean, right there, that should show an error in his judgment. But there are 2 things about that are more important. The first is it is a reiteration. Mind you, it's only reiteration from a couple of weeks ago, but we're on a tight time schedule.
Right.
A reiteration still counts. And the first time he made that statement, Ashok was still on the call. And that when I tend to believe things he says when it comes to autonomy, because he's the one who would know.
Mhm.
Now, your question was about pricing, especially in China. Okay, so in China, there are rival systems that some of them appear to be as good as supervised is today. Some appear to be better fit for the Chinese market, for the Chinese driving style. We do not yet know how Tesla will fare in China. Kyle has said, I can't wait for a direct head-to-head, but we can't do one because the two exist in different worlds. In China, because there are alternatives, because there are choices, I think it would come down to fair market pricing. If it is a slightly better system, I think you can charge slightly more than the competition. But with as many players working on autonomy as there are in China, all of them showing progress, I think it is already becoming commoditized. You can't, you don't have a captive market. You're not the best play. In the US, FSD is the best game in town by orders of magnitude.
Right.
Other systems, there are other systems that can perform pretty well on the highway, but nothing comes close to FSD. Certainly on city streets, but even on the highway, the lane changes are intuitive. They're natural. I was driving home from Portland yesterday, and this guy was coming up behind me. I thought, boy, you know what? I don't want to initiate a lane change, but I do. Oh, never mind. Car's got it. I'm out of his way. And we were going fast enough, plenty fast enough to be well within our legal bounds to stay where we were. We did the polite thing. So I think in China, it's going to be commoditized, and eventually in the US, it will be as well. But I think that's far enough into the future that we don't need to worry about it. Now, how is FSD doing? I mean, I released a video this morning, this Monday morning for us, showing some hilarious failures of FSD in an area that is recently built, a new Costco. Now, it shows up on the visual map, but it clearly is not integrated into the FSD map because it did nothing but fail. And it was hilarious the ways it did, because it didn't know where the entrance was. It takes us the wrong way. It takes us to a dead end. Takes us into the parking lot through the back and then back out onto the street. I'm like, we were there, man. You had it. But this is, as hilarious as it is, this is a minor roadblock. This is the smallest obstacle. This is probably already solved in newer versions. I'm still on 13.2.2. There is no amount of convincing Tesla in the world that would convince them that they should provide me early access to these systems. They are
Now, by the
real
way,
pains in my butt on that. Yeah, go
by
ahead.
the way, I am feeling very, I don't know, deja vu-ish about the part that you just talked about with the car being lost behind Costco and not being able to find the right entrance and stuff, because I've been there. Not with FSD though. I've been there personally, driving behind where the trucks are, loading and unloading. And how did I get back here? So it's not just
This did
FSD
things that were beyond human scope. Like when
beyond.
pulling out of the parking lot,
Yeah.
you and I would look left, look right. And if you looked left, you would see that there's a barricade like 200 feet down in the road ends. And my car says, nah, baby, we're
Let's
going
go
that
look.
way. And we go look. And so it goes down and then it gets stuck. And it tries to do a half-assed U-turn and it just gets stuck. And we waited, we gave it a good opportunity to unstuck, and it didn't. And I was like, well, okay, soon, I hope, maybe. But yeah, we'll see.
All right. So then if we get to the place where it's commoditized, I mean, BYD just announced, I guess yesterday or this morning, BYD is going to be putting their eye of God or some God's, I forget what they called it. But it's going to be on almost all of their cars, a couple of exceptions. And they're not claiming it's as good as FSD. They are claiming it might be better than Tesla's
Autopilot.
right. And they're basically saying we're not going to charge for it, and they're even putting it on their $19,000 car.
So what is their real motivation? They're gathering road data.
Okay.
They're gathering training data. It doesn't have to be, it's free, so it doesn't matter how good it is. They need the data. They will acquire the data. And this is a level of commitment I have yet to see from the legacy players. They're not willing to put an extra $1,000 of compute and sensors into a vehicle that they can't charge an extra $2,000 for. So until the legacy players, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Ford, GM are willing to take that step to make that investment in themselves, they will have no choice but to continue falling behind or partner with somebody who is willing to make those moves. The big advantage that Tesla has is in a lot of places where Tesla operates, Chinese FSD would not be permitted due to security reasons.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about the FSD side of it. So one of the things that occurred to me this morning is, you and I talked last week about a couple of these companies that out of spec, tested their cars and they were able to do some pretty amazing things. And you said, yeah, well, they've been gathering data and they might have large computer systems. It continues to be beyond the scope of my belief that the amazing engineers at Tesla, the size and scope of the computer systems that they've been using and are using now, the volume of data that they've had to play with, the multiple iterations that they've gone through in terms of the various versions and then sending it out to the 100 and sending it out to the 1,000 and sending it out to the 100,000 and then getting that data back and getting to iterate and iterate and iterate, that there's a way to leapfrog that there's a way to somehow all of a sudden have something as good as the current level of FSD without having gone through those processes and those steps to take care of all of the edge cases.
So what's the question?
What do you think? Do you think that it's possible? Do you think that anybody could leapfrog Tesla's multiple years of iterations?
You can abridge that time. There are a lot of lessons that have been learned. If just the fact that compute is faster than it was 5-10 years ago alone will shorten your route, but you still have to gather the data. You still have to train on it. You still have to understand what the data means. And all of that is a big challenge. The benefit is China has no shortage of engineers, of highly qualified, highly experienced, well, highly trained. Experience is another matter. I can't speak to that. I don't have that answer in front of me, but you have fantastic engineers. And a young engineer can do amazing things with software. That's not always experience dependent. But to suggest that they could, do a 10-year project in a year is unlikely. In FSD, in self-driving, it is impossible. The number of edge cases you need to see are unlikely to surface in the first 10 million miles, 100 million miles of driving. You need billions of miles and the ability to adequately, accurately, competently, capably process and understand it.
So as Tesla unveils their system in Texas and then in California and then however many cities and then hopefully nationwide and then depending on regulations in Europe and Australia, et cetera, would you at this point, other than China, let's leave China out as a separate game right now, would you say that there's pretty much you got the battle with Waymo, but Waymo isn't going to be able to scale nearly as fast as Tesla. Would that be true? I think
it is true. I had a viewer send me a photo from Arizona, from Mesa, from the Magna facility, which retrofits the Waymo vehicles. And in this photo, there are like 1,000 new Waymos for the Phoenix that are in Phoenix. I don't know if they're all going to be deployed there, but Waymo is expanding quickly, which leads me to believe their interventions per mile has gotten to a point where they are better able to scale. So let's just pretend that by June, Waymo has reached the point where it's, 100 to 1 cars to supervisors. That's what you need at a minimum to make this work. Let's say Waymo is there. They've still got, if Tesla and Waymo both are able to launch in that manner by June, what that means is Waymo's years behind. because if Tesla can do it with any car that's on hardware 4, that's a lot of cars. That's millions of cars. If it's a not too painful retrofit for hardware 3, as they would likely set up a facility that just does retrofits all day and just blasts through them. Don't even do them at the service center. Set up a new location nearby, like a Jiffy Lube looking kind of place. You could probably even use a Jiffy Lube.
Right,
Car comes in, retrofit, out it goes.
right.
And they would be able to do that very quickly. And every single one they do is now a money printing machine. You've seen my videos about comparing the financials of a CyberCab to a Waymo vehicle. The
Mhm.
CyberCab is at worst half the price, but at best maybe a quarter of the price. That means that in a Waymo, the first dollar a mile being charged has to pay for the vehicle. That's too much. That's too much. Your surplus cost of the vehicle itself is more than Tesla plans to charge for the entire ride. I don't see how you fix that. And well, we've got a Gen 6 vehicle on the way, right? That's a Zeekr. Unless you plan to build those in the US, those are going to cost double out of the gate. And it's an expensive vehicle. It is purpose built, but at what cost, man? It's cost prohibitive. You're right back in the same pickle. So even if everyone solves it, Tesla's ahead.
Okay. So what do you think is going to happen with Waymo in particular with regard to infrastructure? They're apparently, I know in West LA, there was a big brouhaha. Is that the right word? Anyway, there was a big kerfluffle about the fact that Waymo was parking their cars at night in a parking lot next to some apartments. And it was creating all kinds of noise and lights turning on and off and whatnot. People were very upset by it. So there is a part of the nighttime that certainly in the city, there's not going to be any place to park the cars. You're going to have to find someplace to park them, assumedly a place that's going to charge you to park them. Then you're going to need a place to wash them every night, and then you're going to clean them. You're going to need a place to charge them. You're going to need a place to maintain them, etc. And Tesla already has all that. They're already in place.
So half of the things you described have been engineered out of the vehicle. We don't need to get oil changes every 5,000 miles. Waymos do. And what is the process? They're not taking themselves to go get an oil change. Surely they are being taken there by some. I mean, there's a human involved, plus the human who does the oil change itself. That's extra maintenance. That's an extra cost. The parking, I mean, I think everyone's going to have about the same cost. Parking in the city overnight is often empty. So
Well,
you can make a deal with a parking garage for a very cheap rate for the overnight. But it's the off-peak time. You're going to need to deal with that. Now, maybe on a CyberCab, you could determine city streets that are quiet enough that risk of vandalism is low, and it can monitor itself for that. You mentioned charging. Every night, somebody's got to plug those Waymos in. Not so with the CyberCab, they can charge themselves. And then the cleaning. Well, the CyberCab's still going to need to be cleaned to a degree at some point in some locations that can be automated. But until it is, it's so much easier to clean than a Waymo. So it's half of the issues, the daily ongoing issues, have been engineered out, and the other half have been engineered down to a minimum. So what ends up happening, and I think we talked about this, is if I wish to have a business, there's a limit to how much it can scale before I need to hire help. But with a CyberCab, it looks like it's structured in a way that there isn't a limit. I can just keep adding them, and the little things it needs, the charging, it does itself, or it can do it at a Tesla facility. The cleaning could be done by a robot at a Tesla facility for a nominal fee. All of the things that would prohibit me from scaling are gone, which means I don't expect Tesla would want to operate CyberCabs in my little town. Maybe I do. And if it's, 30,000 a car, yeah, at 50, I don't think I could afford very many. But if it's profitable, I could, and just keep
Yes.
adding and adding and adding. And there's no limit to the headspace you would need to address to each vehicle.
Yeah, so, Gary Black, of course, has been the one who's been making most of the noise on X with regard to the competition. And Robert Scoble came on my show and talked about this reality that when you're talking about a Waymo as competition, at least the vehicles that are on the road now are getting able to charge double what a Uber is. And so this would seem to eventually, even if Tesla wasn't involved, eventually Waymo, as they scale, would be kicking Uber out of town. And if Tesla comes along and does it cheaper than Waymo, they'd be kicking both of them out of town. So I keep trying to figure out where Uber has a business going forward, unless the Uber drivers just buy Teslas.
Or Uber themselves buy, or a combination. So what I've heard is that it's comparable to Uber Black. And if that's the case, both remain viable, because yes, Uber Black is more expensive than Uber, but if that's how much a Waymo costs, Waymo don't ask me for a tip. So right there, you're right back to a normal Uber cost. In some countries, tipping is not a thing. I'm envious. I'm glad that you're able to pay workers a wage that is survivable, plus more vacation than most Americans will see in a lifetime. That's magical. I am very happy for you. But you're right. It is likely that Waymo could begin to push out human operators of any kind. But where does Uber fit, or where does Waymo fit compared to Tesla? It's going to be just plain old be more expensive. I've got a show coming up with Tesla Jigsaw where we're discussing the financials of London black cabs and how much trouble they're going to be in when autonomy arrives.
So on the Uber side, I also was thinking about it in terms of the Uber owner. So, Gary says, well, Uber's not going to switch their method of doing business. They're not going to want to own the cars. Okay, so if I'm still the guy that owns the car and I have a choice between putting my car out there without me in it and having it make money, or sitting in the car and dealing with passengers all day long, I think I want to sit home and watch the game.
A question for you. Do you agree with Gary Black's assertion that Uber would not want to own the vehicles?
I have no.
I strongly disagree. It's a money printer. And especially at the kind of volume, if anybody could get volume pricing, it'd be Uber. And they would have an instant advantage. They could quietly, perhaps illegally, prioritize their place in the network. I think Uber would absolutely jump at it, but I think hasn't he been bullish on Uber? And I am not. I have had enough experience with Uber in enough different markets to know that their back end system is grossly mismanaged. They do not understand how they are being used and how they're being misused, and where they are bleeding money from the eyes and tarnishing their own reputation. Uber is badly run, full stop.
I actually think the other part of it also, the customer service side of it, people say, well, it's better than a cab. And I'm like, not much. As much as my rides in Uber, and I've done a lot of rides in Uber all over the country, all over the world, as much as my rides in Uber have been not horrible most of the time, when I'm in the car, the very first thing and I'm outgoing. I'm somebody who doesn't mind a conversation, but the very first thing I'm having to deal with is, am I going to be in some kind of conversation with this person or not? If I do get engaged in a conversation, are they going to be boring, stupid? I'm not really interested in their life story in 15 minutes or an hour. Maybe they're interested in mine. I don't know. But maybe I'm not outgoing. Maybe somebody's an introvert. They don't want to have the conversation. This other person is, generating excess noise. That doesn't even count the radio and all the other kinds of things that might be problematic in an Uber vehicle and are commonly problematic.
So the last time I took a taxi was in Vegas, and The cabbie was zooming in and out of traffic, honking at people, swerving at people, screaming out the window. And when we got there, I did not give him a tip. And he screamed at me at the entrance to the hotel. And I said, okay, so no more taxis. Got it. And I've never taken a taxi since, because there's no way to give this guy 1 star. He would never survive on an Uber network. Not with that behavior. He would have to amend his behavior to not be a dangerous lunatic and a monster. And maybe that's something he's capable of, maybe not. But in any case, I still choose Uber, even though it's not always cheaper than a taxi, except in places like the Dominican Republic. I will you can't. I did. That's right. I did take a taxi in the Dominican Republic after that Vegas experience, because all of the Uber drivers, when you ask for a pickup, they say, nope, go off platform. It's $100
Oh,
for a $12 drive. And all of them, and they all sit at a parking lot a mile away, and they're all in cahoots. And I can't help but think, Uber, you don't notice that every day hundreds of people request a ride and 0 of them get picked up? You don't notice this? And they'll also do that with all the touristy hotspots. If you want to get an Uber from a touristy hotspot, you better plan on walking a half mile out of it so they mistake you for a local.
yeah.
And Uber just doesn't notice, doesn't care, doesn't give you a way to report the users. It is, I mean, guys, you're bleeding from the eyes and your reputation is garbage and you don't know why. Come on. I'm not investing, not a chance in hell.
Yeah. All right. So I think I just, on the one hand, a huge part of the Tesla investment story right now is Robotaxi. I, of course, think it should be Optimus, but people aren't leapfrogging. I mean, I'm sure there's a $50 or $100 the price right now that is Optimus, but the big piece is the coming Robotaxi, because it's happening, in 4 or 5 months or 6 months or whatever. So there might be people who are going, well, all this stuff happening in China, maybe the opportunity, maybe the investment story is not as good as it was last week. So I was curious to get your take on all this. And it sounds to me like, for the most part, the investment story is still extremely strong. And I'll just add to my own comment there that if Tesla ends up with 25% of the overall FSD market worldwide, I'm good.
That's so big. That's so huge. And that's the thing, is you and I have discussed this. When we try and put our projections together, we have to keep scaling them back and scaling them back to the point where people look at it and go, your numbers are way too low, right? And we go, yeah, but have you seen the bottom line? It's bonkers. We already look like mental patients. But what I don't tell them is it's because we have escaped,
That's right.
and
Well,
they are looking for us.
Kathy Wood doesn't mind. She puts out the full number. She says the market cap is, what is her newest number? 34 trillion, something like that. I think 34 trillion.
That's
is
pretty big.
Yeah, not for Tesla, for the entire market. And
I see.
And she figures Tesla will get half of it. So that would only be 17.
Still pretty big.
Pretty
Yeah,
big.
$17 trillion. Pretty
Yeah.
good, I guess.
Yeah. So then I cut that in half and I come up with 7 trillion, which is still double Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be okay. Would that be okay for your portfolio?
If we 7x from here, I think I'd be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Brian. Thank you for helping us to, put things in perspective, because this is, like I said, it's probably the biggest conversation taking place on X right now among the Tesla community. And I guess I'm going to have to get Gary Black on my show again, and he and I'll have to we'll just have to duke it out.
Sounds good.
All right, Brian, thanks again. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.